Thank you, Johan. My name's Rob Shepard. This pretty much started when Joe and another guy named Mo had the idea to bring a bunch of people from Second Life together in the real world to try and talk about, to see if there was something that they could share. That meeting was such a success that they'd planned to have it once a month, and I got the idea that that just wasn't enough, actually. So what I did was I tried to push them into doing something else once a week, and there was a lot of enthusiasm, and at one point I realized that it could really be used for something, and that thing could be to promote something specific, to work on a plan. It would give people a focus. I had the idea about 6 months ago or so to work on a foundation, an educational foundation, so that people could come together and use virtual environments in a really productive way, as opposed to what I saw a little bit as not exploiting its full potential, shall we say. And over the course of that 6 months, at that point, I didn't find that many other people who were specifically interested in it. People who were very much involved in their own educational project, but not so much in working collectively. And that changed after that first meeting. So we had that first meeting, and I tried to bring the people together to see if there was enough interest to focus on a group, and that's pretty much how the Eduverse was formed in the beginning. And it's pretty much grown from them. That hasn't been that long. It's been just about 3 weeks to a month, actually. But it's become much clearer to me, and I think also to the other people who are taking part in it, what that can potentially be. What I've done, more or less putting this together with all the rest of the group, is to take people who I think have a vision, because I really think that's what it requires. You really need to have people who will stand up and say, you know, I think that things should be done this way. There's a value in doing it this way, and make their statements really clear. And that's what I wanted very clearly for the Eduverse as well. The people who I've more or less invited to speak, and both virtually and in the real world, I believe reflect that. All of them have a clear definition of what they want to do, but are also very much on the cutting edge of the technology. So for instance, Trevor, who's going to be our first speaker, he's working in something called Papervision 3D, which is more or less a clientless version of a virtual world. At least that's how I see it. He may look at it in a somewhat different way, but he's also doing one part of it, and I'll let him explain that when he comes to it. But I'm very impressed with the idea that there are a lot of virtual worlds out there, but the idea of using one that doesn't require anything, that you just by virtue of coming onto the web and seeing it on a web page that you can come into a virtual world, I think lowers the bar enough that it makes it a lot more interesting and a lot more accessible. So as opposed to people having to learn a lot about it, about a cliented solution like Second Life, they can just become part of it immediately. And that then, I think, for the service of education, is something that really helps being able to make it accessible to more people. So it's not specifically that you can teach or anything more in that, but I think that allows for a lot more freedom in terms of teaching. A few of the other people who I've asked, I believe, are doing things. A lot of them are doing things in Second Life, and I also believe that they're doing very interesting, in many ways, cutting edge. Our last speaker is also here. And he's going to be speaking about sensory substitution, basically teaching blind people how to see with their ears. And you may well wonder, what has that really got to do with education? And I won't go too much into detail, but because I'd like to discuss it also after he speaks. But what I see is that if we can use a tool to help us understand 3D space in a way that we never could before, that I believe that is then also a very good tool for education. And teaching the blind to see through another sense, through hearing and so on, I believe can also be understood as teaching people who have sight to be able to see other things, that is, in another sense. So right now I can't really look through the back of my head because I don't have any eyes there. But if I could create a sense device that understood what was behind me and translated that into something that I could constantly interpret, then in essence, I would be seeing behind myself. I would be able to see behind my head. And it's quite an amazing technology to think that we can actually fundamentally change how we perceive our world, and then that virtual environments can play an important role in that. Sort of an overview of what I see, sort of one part of the vision, is that virtual worlds can be used in conjunction with the real world. One of the other groups who's going to be demonstrating has taken, they've rewritten the Second Life client and basically the ability to overlay virtual reality on top of reality. So if I wear a heads-up display, I'll be able to look at something and interact with it, but the virtual reality will allow me to interact with it in a way that I can't do now. I mean, I always use the analogy of double-clicking the table. It doesn't really do much. But if there was a virtual interface, then I could get all kinds of information from it. And that's then also true with other people in the same way that you can see people's names above their heads and you can find out information about them. It would be, I think, very useful if we could do that also in the real world. I mean, that may scare some people, but I think that it's actually a huge opportunity. That's also not absolutely clear how you'd use that for education, but I believe that there's a very powerful tool there. And that is also one that we can learn and interface with in terms of understanding 3D space, but also on getting access to a lot more information. It incorporates learning directly into your experience while you're in it all the time. But we can discuss more about that at another point in the breaks, or also some questions and answers and so on, perhaps at the end. I'd like to turn it over now to Trevor Burton, and he will go on and give a short thing on paper vision and his input to it. So please, welcome.